in this episode of the Critical Oxygen Podcast.
Just making sure that you recognize it traditionally takes about 3 weeks. It can take a little bit more, but 3 weeks to really start to see and feel adaptations in that case.
Welcome to the Critical Oxygen Podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. Today, I'm joined by continuing guest host, Coach Aaron Geiser, where we talk about how to progress your specific training with protocols to increase your second threshold and race pace efforts. In this episode, we discuss the transition from the general preparatory or base phase to the race-specific phase of training. We give specific protocols for threshold training and how to progress your threshold training, which will then transition to more race-specific paced training. Overall, this was a great conversation about the specific training progression you can follow to increase your second threshold. Now, without further ado, please enjoy my most recent conversation with Coach Aaron Geiser, all about how to improve your second threshold. Aaron Geiser, welcome back to the show.
Back in the saddle. We're having another fun day here.
Having another fun day. So today we figured we would kind of give a little bit more detail into what something like the specific phase looks like in Aaron's mind's eye. And one of the big caveats that we want to get out of the way is that this may not be how every individual should, approach specific training, but we want to be able to explain some of the protocols, some of the progressions, some of the things that we do to allow our athletes to accumulate more specific volume or specific race pace volume after doing the base phase.
And a surprise to all of our listeners, it's gonna have the typical stamp of Aaron and Phil saying it depends.
Yes.
So we are going to talk about different segments of threshold work, whether it be a 4-to-1, a 2-to-1, a 1-to-1, or even a 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 ratio. And it's going to depend on the athlete. It's going to depend on some of their tolerance. It's going to depend on how they're working through the set, because again, the most important part is the work itself, not that you get that you do it this particular way. It's getting the work done. And we work with a lot of different athletes. Some just need a little bit of additional recovery. Let that anaerobic work capacity build back up before we throw that next repetition at them. So don't, as far as our listeners, don't listen to us and feel like you have to do it one way, because we're going to give you a collection of ways, and it's more about what works for you. You want to get through these sets. You want to get through the last one and feel like you maybe have one left. You don't want to get to the first one and feel like I got nothing left, and then you still got 4 reps left. So it's really making the decision based on yourself, not on a suggestion from somebody else or what is working for one person or another. If it's not going to work for you, you're just trying to stick a square peg into a round hole. We want to make sure that that round peg is going into the round hole, so therefore you are getting the benefit from the work, and we're going to give you a couple of different shapes of how that could be to match up for what square, rectangle, whatever you might be. We're going to make sure that it fits properly. You just need to probably test some of these opportunities to try to find which one's the best for you.
Yeah. And this goes without saying, is that give stuff a try. If you hear something that we suggest here, some workout, and you go out and you try it and you accidentally overcook it on the first couple of intervals, it's okay to stop that workout, save yourself for another day, and then try it again either a few days later or the following week when it fits into your schedule. Because you learn a lot through failure. And obviously you don't want to be, failing workouts all the time, because you want to dial in, what is going to be that optimal adaptation stress. But it is okay to try some things, figure out what works best for you. So with all that being said and all the caveats out of the way, Aaron, if we could just track, sort of like the base phase, right? We talk about typically in the base phase, you start least specific, and then as you get closer to competition, in your competition phase, your taper, you get more specific. So we're coming up, if we're going from a timeline perspective, we're coming up on the transition from the end of the base phase to more of the specific phase, and potentially in the end of the base phase, you've been adding some more threshold work, right, into your athletes, sort of workout plan, along with keeping the VO2 work as well, right? And then how do you make that then transition into then more of the specific work of the specific phase?
Well, it typically depends on one, what the athlete is, what their goals are, what we're trying to accomplish, what like lever are we trying to pull in that case. Also,
Right.
what is the specificity of that particular racer? So a sprint triathlete, a Olympic distance triathlete is going to get a heck of a lot more exposure to these, because we're trying to push that peg up to allow them to race closer to threshold for longer periods of time.
Right.
The 70.3 or full distance Ironman is still going to get exposure to these. It's going to come at a different time, and it's going to get kind of worked through the process in a little bit of a different way, especially with how long that build is. How long are we spending with this athlete in the specific phase for the 70.3 or the Ironman distance? Those questions are always going to be relevant to how much exposure to threshold they're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
The basic, crit racer from a bike racer standpoint is going to get a little bit more threshold work, because they're going to have to put out large amounts of power for a little bit of a length of time, to whether they're pushing the front of the pack or whether they're staying on the back of the pack. So there's different athletes are going to utilize this a little bit differently through the process, but the exposure is always going to be there, because threshold is always going to try to elevate that ceiling of that athlete and their top level of capacity. So we want to try to expose them to shorter bouts that extend to longer bouts, because ultimately that's going to drive that technical threshold that they're able to hold for longer periods of time.
Right. The ability to have a higher sustainable pace before essentially unraveling.
Correct.
Yep.
And then as we get past that, that allows us to then start to throw the more race specific at a 70.3 or an Ironman pace. We might be starting at a little bit of a higher percentage of what we think that output is. Then we start to expose them for longer and longer and longer periods of time to try to get them to be able to hold more specific style race paces for the length of time that they're going to be either on the bike or holding that pace on the run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense to me, right? You're making a little bit of a transition away from, more of that like high intensity VO2 max towards a little bit more of the threshold. And I know you were saying that you still keep some of that VO2 max work, because again, if you're trying to continue to elevate your athlete, you want to continue to push that VO2 max a little bit higher, continue to push that threshold a little bit higher. Where the specificity comes into play, though, is that if you're doing shorter races, you're going to focus a lot more on doing more of that threshold work. But if you're doing more of those longer races, you're going to do that threshold work in the beginning of the specific phase and eventually transition to whatever the race specific pace is. If it's 70.3, then you're going to stop there. If it's Ironman pace, then you're going to, get to that point. And the bottom line is that eventually throughout the specific phase, you want to start to accumulate the most time at your specific race intensity, because ultimately that's what is going to lead you into the competition phase and then get you kind of to the sharpest point, the most honed point when you do actually go to race.
Correct.
Okay. So if you would humor me for just a second, when we're starting the specific phase, could you give me like an example of, maybe like a threshold work, like a bread and butter threshold work that you like to, maybe introduce to an elite level athlete, and then maybe more of like kind of like the age grouper type style athlete? And obviously I know it depends, because it's going to be, are you going to be a crit racer? Are you going to be an Ironman? But like, is there any general, workout that you could share?
Well, also, a part of that answer is going to depend on how well I know the athlete. Have we been down this path before? Because if they haven't, I tend to react a little bit more conservatively, because I don't want to completely blow them out of the water with, say, a 2-minute threshold workout with only 30 seconds of recovery, and then repeat the 2-minute workout with 30 seconds of recovery. I enjoy that workout for myself. So I would legitimately kind of start with, so if I was going through a threshold block, I would maybe do a 1-to-1 on a Monday and then follow up on a Thursday with a 4-to-1 for me. For athletes that are just kind of coming into this phase for the first time with me, I more just stick with the 1-to-1. Let's give them a 1 minute on, 1 minute off, maybe for 15 to 20 repetitions. See how they go through that particular set, and then branch off my movement of what's going to be following that from that, how they handle that single first workout. I might end up coming back with okay, we're going to do 2 minutes this next time with a 1 minute recovery. If I see that, okay, they talked about how they were fatigued even at the minute recovery in that previous workout. For a while now, I'm going to give them straight 1-to-1. So I'm going to try to still elevate it from a 1 up to a 5 minute, but give them an equal rest block to a intense block. So whether it be 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off, 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off, however that goes, trying to get them up to that 5 minutes. If the athlete's recovering really well, I could very well early in this process, like I said, provide them with 2 threshold workouts on the bike or on the run throughout the course of the week. But again, it's really based on how they're recovering. I have to have confidence in that athlete that they're going to be eating well, they're going to be hydrating well, they're going to be doing the small things, they're sleeping well, they're recovering well, and they don't have a whole lot of noise going on in their lifestyle. If that's the case, then I typically would do a little bit of a single 1-to-1 and then start to branch up that second workout to have a little bit of variety to it, whether it be a 3-to-1 or a 2-to-1, or even go to that 4-to-1 style ratio. That is really just going to be dependent on who the athlete is, how they're responding, and how well they're going through those. So it really doesn't even matter to elite, professional, basic age grouper. If a basic age grouper is really handling this well, maybe they've had exposure earlier in their life to something that's provided that style of workout, and let's just say they recover really, really well to it. Let's throw the dose at them. Let's see how well they can continue to build that. We're going to make vast threshold boost with that particular athlete if they've had some exposure to that in some other form in their life, and they're recovering well and they're doing all the small things. So I think it really, I know I just threw out a lot, but I think it really depends on the athlete. But the basic answer to your question is, I like to start with a 1-to-1, and even if that's a 1 minute on, 1 minute off, just to get an idea of where this athlete's going to go from there, that's a good starting point.
Yeah. I always encourage people to start off conservatively, because you can always go up, but sometimes it's a little bit harder if you start out it's harder to recover if you start out too hot and then you get discouraged, right?
Well, and that's going to affect future workouts too, because even
Absolutely.
if they're smart about it and they've run themselves into the wall at 100 miles an hour by going like shooting over that first workout, they're going to have that thought every time that they walk into that particular workout of where's this buzzsaw going to cut my head off?
Yeah.
And I would much rather have that athlete have go through that first activity and okay, it was easy. Okay, we'll explain what you mean by easy. Was it like were the 1 minute hard and then by the you were ready to go after 10, 15 seconds of recovery? Or was it 30 seconds? Give me a little bit of detail, and that detail is going to help me shape and sculpt what's going to be the next workout from there. It's the worst when you don't get that detail and you're like, it was good. It was fine.
Yeah.
Well, what the heck does that mean?
We don't know
like,
what that means.
Give me a little bit more detail of was the 1 minute hard? No. Okay, well, we're automatically going to move you up to 2 or 3 minutes at that point.
Yep.
When in the recovery did you feel like you were recovered? Okay, well, then we're going to start to shape and we need to go to a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1. Not just saying fine. And even when you're asking these questions to yourself, start to look at, okay, well, where did it get hard? When did it get hard? And how hard did it get? Then when did it get easy?
Yep.
When did I get that energy back? These are all questions that are going to help you. If you're self-coached, you're going to start to be able to draw up a plan for these particular workouts that are going to take the shape of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So I guess the only question that I have from that explanation, because I thought it was really, really good. It gets at, where to start, how to progress. What sort of intensity are you having an athlete begin at, right? We say threshold, but how are you measuring that? And then like in where are you starting in terms of intensity for the athlete?
So one, again, it's how well do you know the athlete? Have they done some form of testing, or are you just kind of seeing where their stress load is at? Typically, from a percentage standpoint, the industry thought process is this is about 98 to 102% of FTP. That's kind of that cool number to roll with within the industry. But again, when we are talking about threshold, we're talking about a guesstimate in most cases anyway.
Yeah.
So what I often like to pair that with is, yes, I will use that percentage, but I will use that percentage with the ratings of perceived exertion. What numbers were you feeling? And I try to do just the basic 1 to 10 because it's super easy for an athlete to break that down. I don't need them to start doing the 13 or 18 because most people don't necessarily recognize, I'm supposed to put a 0 on the end of that kind of heart rate.
The 6 to 20 Borg heart rate scale, which is like, or rating of perceived exertion scale is too complicated. 1 to 10 is great. So I like that. And are you looking for what, like a 5 to a 7 generally?
No, I'm actually looking for like an 8 to a 9.
Okay, so you're looking for higher.
So I want it to be tough.
Yeah.
Like if we're looking at an 8.5 to a 9.5 on a VO2 max workout, the threshold I like to kind of be, I might let somebody get away with a 7.5, but I want to get it up to a 9. So I look at that range for myself. I'd like to hear this was an 8 to a 9 rating within, not the whole exercise. I want it in that interval, in that intensity. Was it an 8 to 9?
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. And I do want to tell people is like, don't get this confused with, say, VO2 max work with it, which is commonly prescribed as a 1-to-1 work rest ratio building up in time. So you get, maybe 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off and those sort of things. The effort level during a VO2 max, just like you were saying, is only 0.5 harder, 8.5 to 9.5, but it is considerably should be considerably more challenging, because during the 5-minute rest, you're potentially doing a full rest if you're doing VO2 max intervals, as opposed to a threshold workout, which is also going to be extended for way more repetitions, right? You said you could have somebody do a 1-to-1 for 15 minutes or 15 sets, right? So is that kind of accurate in terms of the description between like the differences between threshold and VO2 max work?
Yes and no, because also somebody that struggles with threshold workout, I might do that 15 1-to-1s, but then after 5 throw in a 3-minute rest, or again, it's hitting the target for that particular athlete. So I think that this is one of those things, Phil, that just does not have a clear yes or no.
Yeah.
And again, it's time at or slightly above what we consider threshold. So if that athlete after 8 repetitions of 1-to-1s is not able to hit 9 or 10, then we should have given them a proper longer recovery somewhere earlier to allow them to come back and be able to hit that routine later in the work. Because again, by the end of the routine, if an athlete's only going to get to 9 in that case, or 8 in that case, we hit 8 minutes or 9 minutes of exposure. I wanted to see 15. Even if I give that athlete a little bit of 2 breaks in between 5 and 6 and 10 and 11, and it allowed them to get the 15 minutes of exposure at or slightly above threshold, we checked a box there.
Yep.
But again, it's knowing if that athlete was not able to hit those or if they were.
Yep.
And if they were, I will try to run them through, because yes, you're going to get benefit from a threshold. You're going to improve your threshold being not having those extended periods of time. Just like I said, I enjoy the 4-to-1. I'm going to get a greater benefit from a 4-to-1 workout than a 1-to-1 workout, because I'm spending a greater amount of time at threshold. But the athlete needs to be able to make it through the prescription to get that time at threshold.
Yeah.
So it really, your question, I'm sure everybody was hoping for a yes or no, but it's just not that simple. It really isn't.
Yeah. And, it's like, if we look across the board, right, typically VO2 max work is done at a higher proportion of your FTP. I think that's a general statement that can be made. So here, what we're trying to do, though, because it is threshold specific work, is we are trying to build that exposure to at or above threshold. And, it's at or above sustainable pace. And so for you, like you were saying, and this is perfect, is that some people, that they may need the extra rest because they've never been exposed to it. But other people like you could go 4 minutes on, 1 minute off and continue to hammer it. And yes, you're going to get a better exposure to it, but that is not where people should start most of the time, unless they have, even honestly, if you've never done this sort of work before, I would just start with a 1-to-1. And then over the course of the next few weeks, you can build that up exactly like what Aaron's talking about here, is you can build it up to 2-to-1, see how you're feeling. You can build it up to 3-to-1, see how you're feeling. And then if you get to 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 and you're still feeling good, then maybe you need to bump up your pace a little bit, right? So I think that's great. I think those progressions will really give a lot of people at least a starting point, and then a kind of a progression or a way to, or a guiding post of where to go. There was another statement you made, I think, in the last episode that was talking about you also keep higher intensity, more punchy stuff. So more of like the VO2 max efforts within the transition to the specific phase as well. How do you?
I'll take it up to race day, to be honest with you.
Okay, yeah. So how do you approach those then, right? Because in the base phase, you kind of start with like you could start with 30-30s, you could do 40-20s, you could do other things like that. But I imagine, just like with anything, you're progressing those along in the base phase. And then when you get to the specific phase, how is that? Is it changing at all, or what's a
So I do, when I do say that, I should say that predominantly it's more on the run that I'm continuing to expose VO2 max work. So
Okay.
I'll do 1K repeats, 800s are still in that. So they're considered the VO2 max long sets, not VO2 max short sets. So
Okay.
when you get that, anything under a minute is considered VO2 short. Anything longer, and you can take VO2 up from 1 minute to 5 minutes, is just more considered long. And maybe instead of 121% of effort in 30-30s, 30-15s, 40-20s, maybe you come down to 110.
Yeah.
Maybe you come down to 108. Maybe you're at 115, depending on if you can handle that or hold that. So it's recognized, as we talked about, threshold is looked at 98% to 102. 103 and above is looked at as VO2 max, and that has a heck of a lot of ceiling to it. So you can technically be at 103, and we could still look at that as a VO2 max effort.
Yep.
From just, the general or basic evaluation of it. So the difference, to answer your question, the difference would be I would pull them closer to 4 and 5 minutes.
Okay.
But they would be lower on that percentage wheel. They wouldn't be 120, 121% at that point, because that would be bonkers if you could hold that for that long. That'd be impressive.
Yeah.
But it's more likely that we're going to do that at 108 or 104% or 105%. So it really, again, that's going to be some tolerance for the athlete. And also, I feel like it's good for the mitochondrial development, but also I like it from the mental perspective, because an event in the 70.3 full distance Ironman, there's going to be points where you're just kind of mentally, man, I'm ready for this day to be over. And you just have to fight through it, because you're like, oh crap, maybe I got 26 miles left. Maybe I have like 8 hours left. Who knows?
Yeah.
So having a little bit of mental strength, and I feel like that also aids in the physical strength that you're putting through the output on the effort as well. So I routinely will keep like a 1K repeat workout where it might be closer. It's still what we would consider it Endure IQ. It's still an L5 effort, but instead of where a 400, we might have been going at 120% or 118% of our pacing strategy. Maybe we're pulling that down to closer to 110%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense, right? The longer your duration of your interval, generally the less intense it has to be in order to be able to maintain.
Correct.
That's just what it comes down to. Okay, so that makes sense. So now we've kind of gotten, we have some VO2 stuff, we have some threshold stuff early in the specific phase. Then how are you transitioning those workouts as you go forward to, let's just use the example of somebody who is like doing a 70.3. How are you transitioning those threshold and the VO2 work to be more specific?
So the way that those get more specific is they increase in length before we move them into maybe a 70.3 development style workout. Okay. So maybe we take them to a 4 or a 5 minute exposure at threshold, then follow it up into the next block with 10-minute or 15-minute continuous efforts at race pace, or we'll do a 4-minute up, 8-minute under, 3-minute up for a 15-minute rep. There's a couple of different ways that we can slice that bread, but it traditionally is expanding in length of threshold before moving into something that's a little bit more holding this race pace in the following weeks or the following block.
Yeah, and again, by expanding and extending the interval length, you're going to inevitably have to slow it down to some extent in order to be able to do the workout. So it makes sense that transition point, right, is once the athlete, and this is hypothetical, once the athlete gets to a 5 minute on, 1 minute off, perhaps they have to start slowing down a little bit. And I don't know if you'd ever go that high, but that was just an
It would
idea.
not be a 5 minute on, 1 minute off. Typically, that would start to be a 5 minute on, 5 minute off kind of. That would be a brutal workout if
Absolutely.
we were doing 102%. But what I would look at is that what we're trying to accomplish is elevate the percentage or wattage that you're able to hold and sustain at race pace for longer periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is the exposure that you're providing at 5 minutes at 103%, when you come down to, let's say, even a 91%, or let's say that somebody's at 89% for 10, 15, 20 minutes, that's going to be, I mean, to some people, it's going to be a holiday. Some people are going to look at that as, this is a vacation.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great. But otherwise, I mean, it still is going to be difficult, but it's just a different feeling, and it's a much more sustained feeling, and that's what we're shooting for within that kind of transition from that threshold block to more of a race-specific block.
Mm-hmm.
So when we say specificity, it doesn't always necessarily have to take the specificity of the particular distance that you're racing at all points. It can be a collection on early that leads into something different. So recognize that even specificity has that capability of wearing a couple of different hats as what it's specifically driving.
Right.
It's not always just specifically driving a race pace effort. It might be specifically driving up what your ability to hold race pace effort is, but that's part of the block and the development from that particular block that you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? It's again, like I view training to some extent as like a sideways pyramid, where it's like least specific to most specific when you actually get to race day. And when I mean most specific, it's like on race day, you're doing race paces and those sort of things. But before that, right, you have the tapering of your angles, and the top end of that can be through your threshold, and then it's going to transition towards more of your race specific pace, and then it's going to be holding and sustaining that race specific pace for longer. So that's how I view it, and that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense, the way that you're explaining it. So could you give me an example of, like you said, you kind of grazed over this, but you said, yeah, we're going to do 15 minutes and we're going to do 4 minutes above, 8 minutes below, 3 minutes above, and that's going to be one, sort of rep. How do you progress that, or how do you, like, is it at 102% of FTP and then you go under like to 98, or is that like a 91% that you're kind of down?
That would typically, our perspective is the up is either at or slightly above 70.3 pace. The down is at Ironman pace, and then the up back again is at that same 70.3 or just slightly above.
Okay.
So it's exposure to, and again, the thought process behind that is that if you come slightly above, then go below, you're able to kind of drive a little bit more anaerobically, or I should say aerobically and anaerobically, recover just a little bit to come back to that next portion that's slightly above again. Yep. So it's trying to, again, elevate that percentage of what you're able to hold. But traditionally what I like to do is with any athlete that's going into that particular block, I like to have some similarities between the workouts from either a week of a different style, come back to that same style the third week, and then the second week and the fourth week are similar. I like to have some things that I'm able to look at and compare and contrast the improvement over that first and the second time that they see it. Or you could legitimately, depending on some athletes have this capability of seeing the same workout for an entire block and be perfectly fine with it. I typically like to throw in just a little bit of variety. Like I said, first week and third week are the same, third week or second week and the fourth week are the same, and then I compare those two workouts.
Yep.
Start to look at how they responded with heart rate, how it drifted through the set, and kind of go from that analysis from that perspective gives me some similarities rather than having over a 4-week block 4 different workouts that might have the same response, but they're broken down in a completely different way and then don't allow me to compare and contrast. Okay, in this fourth set, 4 minutes into it, your heart rate started to drive up the first time that we exposed it. You had a different workout last week. We came back to the same workout. Look in that fourth set. This time, we know that we are progressing and adapting to the exposure that we're giving, because look at where that separation, the heart rate did not have that same climb in that same situation on the first exposure. These just allow me to kind of go back and look and say, okay, I see similarities between these, but I'm seeing the positive progression that I want to see, because when I'm comparing the week over week, we're seeing hopefully some form of improvement from a physiological output.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is a form of progression, right, within your workouts. Like you're not necessarily changing the workouts. If you're going every 2 weeks, you're not changing the workout. But what you should be seeing, if you're providing adequate stimulus and adequate recovery, is that the internal or the physiological demand for that interval is actually becoming a little bit less. Your heart rate is coming down. And that is a good sign of progression and adaptation. So I really like that. And that is something that I now recommend to people, is like repeat, like do the A-B sort of, repeat workout weeks, or just if you can handle it, do the same workout, 3 or 4 weeks in a row and see how things are responding to that.
And the other thing that from a progression standpoint, where I might have had 4 repetitions the week, one, they'd have 5 or 6 in the week that they repeat that workout. Yeah. So I'm still trying to progress time too, but again, what I'm still trying to see is where we might have had 4 repetitions on that week before, I'm still trying to see the same heart rate response in the 5th and the 6th. Mm-hmm. If I've added one or if I've added both, again, that's going to determine on the athlete, their volume, everything else. But if I'm adding that, what I want to continue to see is the stability in the heart as we continue to expand out those repetitions as well. So this is the reason why I like to follow this model for myself, is because it actually gives me substantial information to reassess. Where if I give you a 2-minute up and under, and then the following week I give you a 10-minute straight hold, and then the following week after that I give you something completely different, it just makes it a little bit more difficult for, like, one, of course I'm still analyzing what the response of the heart rate is to the power that you're putting out, like the other things that are around or surrounding that workout. Of course, I'm able to look at that. But for me, this is how I can physically show to an athlete. If they ever question, well, hey, how do you feel like I'm doing? Okay, let me grab this workout. Let me grab this workout. Okay, I'm going to stick them I'm going to try to stick them side by side, or I'm going to just kind of jump from one screen to the next and show, here's what we're looking at in this one. Here's what we're looking at in this one. This is why I know that you are progressing, is because of this factor. And then I can actually point to that factor, and then the athlete has a greater understanding of, oh, he's not just saying this to say this to make me feel good. There is some form of reason and measurement behind it that he is saying. And this is, again, why it's important to have certain things measuring our output because that gives us the opportunity to assess and analyze and compare and contrast
Mm-hmm.
to things that give us validity to, yeah, you are adapting positively. And the reason why I know is this.
Yep.
If you're just guessing or you don't have that information, it makes it a heck of a lot more difficult.
Yep. 100% agree with that. So I'm kind of running out of time here in terms of I have another meeting coming up, but with about 5 more minutes, is there, are you trying to progress your athlete to a certain amount of accumulated time? I know it's highly dependent, but is there like a goal that you have within, like the end of the specific phase and maybe into the transition of the competition phase where you're trying to be like, I want this athlete to be able to maintain 70.3 specific race pace on the bike for X amount of time. And that kind of gives me some indications like of, yep, checked off that benchmark. I think they're pretty prepared. And I know it depends, but like, how long are you continuing to progress it?
So it all comes back to, is the athlete adapting to the exposure?
Right.
And if we've given the block and we didn't see the exposure, it's time to move on anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to force that to happen because maybe this athlete is just, maybe they just don't have the capacity to grow this particular way. I mean, we've all seen athletes as coaches that we've thrown higher intensity work at them. Maybe they break down, but they really they explode off of straight endurance work somehow. I feel like in that case, Phil, it's not setting up those expectations on the athlete. It's letting it come naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the time to move on or continue it is presented to you, you make that decision. Because maybe I'm guaranteed there's athletes out there that will still get great benefit from this particular exposure and go into a 70.3 and could take it very late into that training and race phenomenally by doing this. But again, going in as a coach with preconceived, like, yes, I know and I have the thought of this is what I want to see.
Yeah.
But I don't place that stress up against the athlete that if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. We just move on to the next thing. We start exposing them to the next exposure and then hope that that's the one that starts to move the needle. And I mean, I guess to answer that question, it is complex, but I'm not looking for a particular point here and a point here and making sure that progression goes from that starting point to that, because maybe that athlete just doesn't do it.
Right.
Well, we've gotten to wherever that point on that level is at this point. We need to move on to the next. So it's a matter of just progressing and moving them on to another thing. And, sometimes you're going to expose an athlete to a particular style of training. They're not going to adapt to it. There's no reason to get frustrated. There's no reason to start pointing blame. Make a note of it and recognize, okay, maybe next year either I need to start this a little bit earlier to give them a little bit more exposure, or I don't expose them and expose them to something else that they actually responded better to, especially if that doesn't necessarily, if it's not going to make them a better athlete. Yeah, we don't want to necessarily completely cross it off, but it's not a bad thing if we don't, or if we give them exposure when it's not as time sensitive or when it's not as critical to move on to that next layer.
Yeah. No, I was talking to another coach and he was saying essentially the same thing as like if an athlete isn't progressing, then it's probably time to change things up. And if they are continuing to progress, then continue to allow them to adapt, because that's obviously a stress that is giving them positive adaptations and will most likely benefit them. Right. So I think that's, That's a phenomenal answer, because a lot of the times I think we have these preconceived notions that like, oh, a block has to be a certain amount of time, or if I want them to get to a certain goal, and it's like, no. If you're seeing progression week to week and it's like a linear progression, then you could potentially keep that going until it kind of plateaus out, because you want to try to get the most out of that adaptation that you possibly can. Whereas if they're flatlining the entire time, through 4 weeks or something, and it's time to switch, then yeah, it's probably time to switch, because maybe they just don't respond to that as well.
But again, recognize it takes 3 weeks at least to kind of get that response in most cases. So don't hear this and say, well, I did it 2 weeks, I didn't get any better at it, I'm moving on. So it to our listeners, just making sure that you recognize it traditionally takes about 3 weeks. It can take a little bit more, but 3 weeks to really start to see and feel adaptations in that case.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end. I hope you guys got a lot from this. I certainly did. Anytime we talk about, like the protocols and stuff, like my engineering brain's like, oh, there's got to be these perfect protocols, and then of course Aaron is like, whoa, Phil, pump the brakes. It actually depends on a lot of different stuff, and I really appreciate that perspective on things. So Aaron, thank you for coming on the show as always, man. Really appreciate it. All of your great insights and stuff like that. I know you got some athletes that are racing this weekend, so I know they're going to crush it. I've been messaging them, giving them encouraging comments and stuff like that. You can always, if you guys have any more questions about specific protocols and other things like that, feel free to reach out to me at Critical02 on Instagram. You can reach out to Aaron if you have other questions about coaching and intervals and other things like that on Instagram at @TryAGeiser. You can comment down below if you're on YouTube, and if you've made it this far in the podcast, hopefully you're really enjoying it. So leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, and don't forget to join Aaron for his long ride for Zwift. It happens every Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern. So go and do that. You can ask questions there. He actually says it makes it a little bit easier for him if he's answering questions. And like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any topics for us, let us know, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.